That's it. Okay.
Uh, Yep. Okay. Fine. Okay, so that means that we have to start again. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'll start again then. So the business analyst, so we said the business analyst is a point of contact. Sorry, let's pop up. So we said the business analyst is a point of contact between the business and the technology people. So we are saying the business analyst will represent the organization. If you are liaising with our external supplier, so the business analyst will be the person that will be liaising with this external supplier when it comes to the requirements. So, and we also said the business analyst is more or less like an intermediary between the business and the technical people, because sometimes you may not necessarily have to be external supplier. It may be with the technical team or the IT team within the organization that you need to liaise with. Sorry, let me. So you will be the person that will be liaising with, that will represent the business to discuss these requirements. And we also mentioned about the requirements as well. So the requirement is a feature or a need of a need of the business. So it's more or less, for example, when we say requirement is something that you need, that the business needs. So requirement, sorry, this notification, sorry. So the requirement is a need of a business, and so the business analyst, what we manage is just the requirements. That is the word of requirement. That is where we actually fit in, and so. And the requirements may be for a new system, or it may be for a change system, maybe an existing system, and they want to change it, they want to do some things to it, maybe sort of like a revamp or maybe re-engineering of some processes. So it's still a requirement. And if it has to do with something that is a new system as well, so it's still a requirement. So be it something that is already existing, or there is going to be a change, or is going to be a new one, is categorized as requirement. So as a business analyst, you deal with the requirements, you manage the requirements. And also, we talk about why do we need a BA? For example, because you may be thinking, oh, how does the BA fit in? The BA, because in any project that you do, you need a BA. When you have it like a standard project, in a project management, you say, for example, if you want to set up a community center, let's say we are talking about a big community center, you have a project team, so which means you have your project manager, you may have account manager, you may have building construction engineer, you may have a surveyor, you have a BA. Because for the community center or for the local council or the government, for them to be able to say, give the project or maybe the work to the construction to whoever organization that is going to build that community center, they need to put something together. The construction company needs to understand what they need to build. They need to know what you require, what you are required of them. They need to understand how many rooms do you want to build? What is the foundation going to be? Is it going to be a block of flat? Is it going to be a flat? Is it going to be just like a big hall? Is it going to have a library? Is it going to have how many rooms is it going to have? So these are the things. So this is why we need a BA, because it's a BA that will actually document all those requirements. A BA will work with a BA will be from the government side, or let's say, for example, let's say local council, Bexley's local council. So the Bexley local council will have a BA that will actually document those requirements together. The person will work with the stakeholders to say, okay, you said we have a vision to build a community center. What are we trying to build? Why do we want to build it? How many people do we want to cater for? What are the things that we want to have in place? How many rooms do we want to have in there? So as a BA, you need to understand all the requirements, why they need it, and what you are documenting, is it fit for purpose? So the project manager will just be managing the project. The project manager cannot document the requirement. So that is why they need a BA in that project. So that's why I said for every project, you need a BA to actually work with you. And because the BA forms part of the project team, so regardless whether you have 10 project manager, you still need a BA. Even if you have 10 surveyor, you have the people that will build it, is a BA that will determine what the construction engineer or what the project manager is going to manage. The project manager is there to just manage the project. But the BA is the one that will say, this is what we need, this is what the Berkeley Council or Best Local Council, this is what we need, this is what we want you to implement. We want you to have like 2 rooms, a library, 3 toilets, a guest room, a disabled toilet. So that's the specification, because the BA needs to document the specification of your project or the building. And that is why we say a BA is a very important role in every project, and is a very vital role in a project team. Some organizations, some people, when you work with some colleagues, they may be like, oh, they may not really, some people think BA is just like admin, let's say, like some I'm trying to find a word to read, like a irrelevant role, but that's not true. Because if a BA, as a BA, if your requirement is poor, definitely that project will be poor. If you fail to document the right requirements and accurate requirements, so if you fail to document accurate requirements, that project will fail. Because, for example, if the local government is saying, or the stakeholder is telling you, say, we need 5 rooms, 3 disabled toilets, and as a BA, that is why one of the skills that you have to be attention to detail is very key. And they've told you, say, okay, you have to do 5 rooms and 3 disabled toilets. But when you were documenting requirements, you actually put 4 rooms and 2 or even 3 disabled toilets. So that means you've missed the requirements because it's not correct. That is not what the council actually need. So at the end of the day, if you submit that to the supplier or the construction engineer, and they build 4 rooms with 3 toilets instead of 5 rooms, so that means that project is not 100% successful. So that is why we say a BA is a vital role in the project, and it also determines the success of every project. Because if it's just like garbage in, garbage out, if a BA documents poor requirements, the project will deliver poor results. Because it's whatever you document that the implementation guys or the technical people, that's what they will bring out for you. So that's why, as a BA, is a very vital role in a project, and it determines the success of the project. And some people ask, why do we have any restriction on the industry which BA can operate and that can work? I know some people may want to ask that question, so that's why I put it as one of the questions. As a BA, you can work in any industry. You can work in any construction, aviation, public sector, any organization as a BA. As long as they are implementing a project, a BA can work in there. If you are working in a bank, they need a BA in their project team, in the organization, to carry out some regulations. So they need a BA to actually say, these are the requirements that we want to, the regulations that we want to put in place. So we need a BA in our project team to be able to document this requirement. And also, for example, maybe, let's say, for example, NHS. You need a BA because for NHS to be able to implement some, for example, maybe to roll out systems, new systems or new application, or to introduce maybe new inpatient record, or maybe a form. So you still need a BA to work with the project team to say, what exactly are we trying to achieve? What are the requirements? So wherever they have a project team, to carry out some projects, you need a BA to actually help you with that. Although sometimes you have some roles that they say a B or PM also, they do the work of the BA. But most times, as a PM, if you don't have an experience of a BA, if you don't have the skills of a BA, you may not be successful in that role. But a BA can actually do, like, because there are some roles out there, they will say they want a draw, is a draw role. Like, you have to be a BA and a PM. You carry out this work you perform the role of a BA, and at the same time, you perform the role of a project manager. So in a nutshell, so you can work as whatever your discipline is, whether you have a background of maybe pharmacies or maybe or engineer or civil, electrical, whichever industry that you have, you can still apply that. For example, if you have an accounting background and you become a BA, if you're working in an organization that they are trying to roll out, for example, maybe any financial or projects, you have a better advantage in there because you have a finance background. So when you're even documenting the requirements, if they're saying, oh, maybe the payroll has to do this, they want the spreadsheet to do some certain things, because you have a background of accounting, you can actually apply it then, and it gives you more advantage. Or maybe for example, as a network engineer, and you have a BA or a security person, or maybe security personnel, and they're carrying out, they want to roll out cyber projects. As a BA, because you have a security background or networking background, you have a better advantage, because when they are talking about, let's say, intrusive or threats or maybe phishing, those are the terminology that we use in networking. So when you have all those background, you have more advantage in those areas, in those industry. But that does not mean that it limits the industry that you can work. So as a BA, you can apply to any industry, for any job. The thing is that you just need to have a basic skills, because as a BA, you need some certain skills that you need to apply, to all the projects, regardless of aviation or banks, financial institution, or public sector or health sector, regardless. So you need some certain basic skills to carry out your job. And also, the next question is just about the IT background. Do you need the IT background to become a BA? No. You don't need any IT background to become a BA. You don't need. Because all you need is to be able to use your Microsoft. Once you can use Microsoft Office, and when I say Microsoft Office, there are some tools that you need to use there, because you're going to use Microsoft Word to document your requirements. You're going to use Excel to document your requirements. You're going to use Visio. But there are some applications that you need to be able to use. But you don't need to be like techie. When I mean, maybe you need to know how to, some people may think, oh, it sounds maybe too technical, but that is not the way it works. Everything is just about plain English. So once you can understand, what they're saying, what they ask you to do, and you can document it properly, you can become a BA. You can do a BA work. So you don't need to have IT background, to do, to become a BA. And so I will move to, and also a BA, you can work on different types of projects. You have agile projects, waterfall. So regardless of whether you have an experience, because by the time you get into industry, you will get familiar with it, and once you just apply your skills, regardless if it's agile or waterfall, you can do it. And so I'll just move to the competencies. And like I said earlier, as a BA, there are some certain skills that is required for you to be able to, perform very well and be successful in your role. So there are some categories of the skills. So the first one is the personal qualities. So we are talking about you need to be able to analytical thinking. You know, like for example, if they tell you that, oh, we need a system, we need some applications to be installed on our computer. So the first question I will ask is, why do you need the application in the first place? So the business, the stakeholder needs to be able to tell me the reason why they need that application. And if the stakeholder is telling me, oh, we need the application to process documents or the invoices, okay? So because sometimes the stakeholder will tell you, oh, we need this particular, let's say we need SAP or we need Sage to be able to carry out, to process these invoices. I will ask, why do you need Sage in the first place? Oh, because somebody recommended it, or maybe some of the organization are using it. So what I need to ask is that, what exactly do you want to do? We want to process invoice. How do you want to process the invoice? Do you want to automate it? Is it something real time? You need to ask them questions. The reason why they want it, is there any justification? Because there are sometimes, probably, maybe they just need off-the-shelf package to just do it. Because sometimes you need to look at the cost as well, although it's not really your responsibility to look at the cost. But when they actually tell you that they need this particular thing, you need to understand why they need it. And you need to be able to think. Because sometimes they will just tell you things, but you need to be able to think, why do they need it? And sometimes they will tell you something that you don't think is actually, is actually correct. So there's a way you have to probe them for you to be able to understand what they actually need. And also about problem solving. Problem solving is, they're saying, oh, we have a problem, the application that we have at the moment, we cannot process, is very slow, and we hardly process 5 invoices in 1 hour. So you need to be able to help them on how they can solve this problem. So where exactly are they trying to understand the problem? So then you'll be able to propose some options. By the time you gather all the requirements, you'll be able to propose some options to them and say, okay, these are the solutions. We've gone onto the market. These are the things that we actually found. Is it going to solve the problem? Then you will try to present it to them and help them to decide as well. Although it's going to be their decision, you are not going to decide for them, but you are just going to make the suggestions to them. And also, when you talk about the communication as a BA, if you cannot talk, or if you are shy or timid, I'm sorry, you cannot actually do the job. Like for myself, I talk too much. But at the same time, you have to be able to communicate with your stakeholders. Because when you, as a BA, you liaise with stakeholders, those are the people that you interact with, because that is where you get your requirement. Sometimes you may have to approach maybe the head of departments or the directors or the managers. So it's not about hierarchy. You may even maybe the admin staff, or maybe the end users, or maybe the CEO, if it's necessary. Sometimes you just have to. So regardless of, so that's why sometimes in some of the job adverts, they will say, oh, you should be able to communicate with stakeholders at all levels. So it could be executive level, it could be managerial level, it could be, any level. So as a BA, you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to speak. You need to be able to interact. Because there's no way, you cannot be doing everything via email. You have to come face to face. Sometimes there are some you have to communicate via email as well. So it's about communication. The job involves, let me say, I can't put a figure on it, but it involves communication. Because if you don't communicate via email, you communicate face to face or via the workshop or via interview. So it's all about communication. So they will ask you that you need to have a good communication skills. You need to be able to write as well. So that's one of the key skills of a BA. And also, we are talking about the relationship building. As a BA, you need to be able to have a good relationship with your stakeholder. And most times when you go for an interview, they will say, how do you manage a difficult stakeholder? Because hardly will you escape that in an interview. They will say, how do you manage a difficult stakeholder? So because in an organization, there will be at least one person that will be a bit difficult for you to, maybe to interact with, maybe one of your stakeholders. And how do you manage this? Because when you are gathering your requirements, you need to relate with the stakeholders. And if one of them is trying to be difficult, you need to find a way to break that barrier, to be able to have a relationship, to be able to get your requirement. Because your own main purpose is to get your requirements, not to be friends with the person, with your stakeholder, but it's for you to achieve your aim, to achieve what you are after, to get your requirements out of that person, and to also validate it. So you need to be able to know how to build relationship, because sometimes in my place of work, it's not that is all of them that are nice to me, but but because I know that one way or the other, I will have maybe some projects I need to do with it. Sometimes it may just be, hello, how are you doing? Just to chat with them. Oh, how was your weekend? Are you all right? So everything okay? Because when you have this relationship with them, it may not really be like maybe personal, but at least you have a good relationship, a good rapport with them. So whenever you want to ask them for something, it will be easy for you to get it from them. But if you are the sort of type that you just go your own way, maybe when you see some people, you just snub them sometimes. Eventually, if the person is, you find out to be one of your stakeholders, so you now say, oh, I need to. It's just so funny that you can't really see my session. Sometimes you just be like, oh, I need to ask you about this project. The person will also be reluctant to give you audience because you don't have a good rapport in the first place. But if it's somebody that you've met at maybe the lift or at the canteen one of these days, you've actually, hello, hi, it will be easy for you to actually bond, to be able to say, oh, I'm working on this project. I've been assigned as a BA to this project. I was told that you are one of the SMEs and I need to gather the requirements. So what exactly do you want in the project? What exactly are you trying to achieve? From there, you'll be able to relate very well with the stakeholder, because if you have a difficult stakeholder, there's no how you'll be able to get through, because that person may even stand as a blocker to you. And if you have a blocker, there's no how you can progress. So that is why they say you should have, a good relationship. You should be able to build relationship, with your stakeholder, with people, so that, because you never know, probably maybe you come across the person and the person will happen to be one of your stakeholders. And so attention to details, as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the key skills as well as for a BA. Because when your stakeholders, when they tell you something, because they are not going to give you any documents that, oh, these are the requirements, these are the things that we need. They are not going to give you a list. They will just be telling you from their maybe head or their mouth. They will just be telling you. So it's you that need to know that what you are jotting down, because there is no, you can go, when you are getting the requirements, definitely you need to go with your computer or your pen and paper. You will be writing it down, because you need to make sure you capture the requirement properly and adequately, accurately, 100%. Because as a stakeholder, because you may have like different stakeholders. So, for example, if you're trying to roll out a system, for example, let's use health industry like NHS. They are trying to roll out an application to be able to manage all the patients. So imagine you have the GPs, imagine the surgeon, you have the receptionist or the admin staff, you manage the, some other departments like that, maybe the emergency and ambulance, the inpatient, the outpatient. You have to gather requirements from all these areas depending on the project. So if the admin or the receptionist, they've actually said this application, we want it to be able to have a form like this so that it will capture their telephone number, their address, and this. And you also move to the GP. The GP is saying, actually, I will want their or maybe genetics or maybe their blood type, blood group details. We want their parents' hereditary, any hereditary problem or sickness or something. You move to the surgeon or the surgeon area or neurosurgeon or department. They give you their own requirements. So these requirements, you have so many requirements. So you need to make sure. So if you are not really careful, you will miss some requirements. So that's why you need to make sure whatever how small it may be, you cannot ignore any requirements. You need to make sure you capture all requirements down. Regardless whether you are going to implement it or not, it needs to be captured. Even if they say, oh, we need the application to be popping up every 5 minutes, you still need to write it down. Although later on, when you are not doing the validation, it may be dropped out. But at the first, you still need to have a master document that will say, oh, the surgeon, they gave you 6 requirements. These are the requirements. The admin staff, they gave you 20. The GP gave you 15. Everything needs to be adequate and it needs to be detailed. So that is why the attention to detail is very, very, very important. Because, for example, if you are developing a website, and if I tell you, if the organization is telling you we need the background of the website, yeah, sorry, that's a bit. So if the organization is or the stakeholder is telling you we need the background of the website to actually be blue, they should have, like, the wallpaper should be blue and maybe the login page should be red. You need to make sure you write it down, because if you don't write the background of the website should be blue and the login page should be red, and you just say, oh, we want a website and we want a login page, without stating the red login page or blue background. If it's just submit, we need the organization need website, they need a login page, the developer develop it, the tester test it, because the tester just see that, okay, you actually written a login page and a web page. They don't know that because they did not capture the requirements, they won't know the actual thing that the stakeholders have informed you. So they would test it and say they pass. So by the time you now deliver it to the stakeholder and say, oh, we've actually developed the website for you, so this is the website, so you have your login page. When you are doing your final acceptance testing with the stakeholder, as a stakeholder, I would tell you, sorry, this is not what I requested. I requested a red login page and a blue web page. So that means that requirement has failed. That delivery has failed. That project has failed in a way. That means it needs to rework. So, and if you can trace it back, you will know that the problem is actually from the BA that actually documented, that did not do a detailed documentation requirements. So that's why I said earlier that a BA is a very vital role. So if you document poor requirements, you will get a poor result. So because now from that scenario, we can see that the BA did not document a data requirement saying a red login page. Despite the fact that the BA said login page, but it's not red. Maybe because sometimes the developer will just document anything. They may just even use their own color because you did not specify the color. So even the web page, because you did not specify the web page in the requirements. So probably maybe the developer has just done pink or maybe green web page. So meanwhile, the stakeholder actually told the BA saying blue web page and red login, but because as a BA, if you did not actually document that, you just think, oh, it's just, oh, we need a login page, we need a web page. That is not how it works as a BA. So that's why I said that's project. That means now with that problem, the stakeholder will reject it and say, I'm sorry, this is not what we request. We cannot accept this. That means that has to go back to the BA. The BA needs to update that document, the requirement document, then send it to the developer. The developer will have to do the writing. Then the tester will have to test the writings now that they have a correct or accurate requirement document of what the stakeholder wants. Then the tester can say, now it has red login page and blue web page. Then the stakeholder can now confirm saying, okay, now I have my red login page. I can sign off the requirements. So that is why you need to understand how it works. You need to understand it's not just documenting requirements. You have to document it in detail. Whatever the stakeholder says they want, that is what you need to document. So now from that scenario, you can see that it's going to cost them maybe more money, because probably if you are paying the developer per day, that means they have to do additional maybe extra days work to be able to rectify that problem. You are going to probably maybe pay the tester again. The project is going to pay the tester again. That's incurring additional costs. And also the time, probably maybe the delivery is supposed to have been maybe 4 weeks, but because of that mistake and you did not realize it on the, doing the user acceptance testing phase, that means probably maybe that has caused them additional 2 weeks for the developer to do the right thing and do the tester to do to test it again. So you can see, and sometimes, that kind of a BA, they may even fire the person and say, oh, this is not, or the person did not do the job properly. So that's why the attention to detail is very key, and you need to make sure, you document whatever they ask you, you document it in detail, nothing like omitting any words. You don't omit any words, so you capture everything. And also we move on to the team working. As a BA, you work as part of the team. You work with the project manager, because for every project, you have a project manager that will be managing the project. Even sometimes some roles, they will say a BA, you need to act as a PM as well. And when you're acting as a PM, you need to be able to manage a team, because you have other people that you are working with. So you will be working with quality engineer like the tester. You will be working with the assurance team, solution architect. Depending on the project, you may be working with the developer. And also, sometimes if it has to do something in the project that involve external suppliers, so you need to work with external people as well. So it's not just only BA team that you'll be working with or your manager. So you need to relate with people. You have SMEs as well. If you are working on different projects, you may have stakeholders that are SMEs. So you need to make sure you bond with your team, because you will need information from maybe the business change about the communication, or maybe about the policy. It could be anything. So, and it's not just only as a BA, in any project, any role, you need to be able to be, they will say, oh, a team player. Because how will you be able to carry, you can't just be, you can't just work alone, because you work with people, you interact with people. So definitely you need to be able to bond with a team. You need to be able to be a team player. So that's where the team player comes in. And also, we talk about the ability to document. I didn't put that there, because these are just few of the skills that I think we need to actually stress. So, ability to document, because as a BA is all about documenting. So documentation, because you document a lot. You document your process maps, you document your requirements documents, you document so many things. So you need to be able to write. Like, if we don't really like writing, I'm sorry, it will be difficult for that person. It may be difficult for the person to be able to cope, because sometimes, I remember one of the roles I had to write, the business requirement documents from the scratch, because the stakeholders, they're not going to give you any document like I said earlier, so they may just give you the requirements. So you have to put everything together, put the background information together, the problem statements. You have to, like forming the document, like forming a textbook, let me just say, although sometimes it may be 20 or 60 pages, but you have to put the words together by yourself. You need to be able to, compose the document. Is just like putting a proposal together by yourself. So sometimes you may be fortunate to have a template. Most organizations do have a template, but in some cases you may have to start everything from the scratch, and at the end of the day you may end up writing maybe like 40-something pages. So it's not that easy sometimes when it comes to documentation, except if you are very good at writing, English, grammatical, everything is so you will be fine. But it's all about documenting as well. So we'll move on to the business knowledge. So the business knowledge is just about, for example, if you are working in let's say I'm trying to, for example, because I have IT background, like networking, computer background, and so, or if like for example, okay, one of my colleagues was actually working on cybersecurity projects, and I was like, okay, when the person was talking about intrusion detection, the access points, like all these, networking jargons, I could relate with it. I said, okay, this is it. You are talking about the IPS, about the phishing, about, I was saying some of those terminologies that we use in networking, because I have, the background, I have that knowledge of networking and about the cybersecurity. So I was able to relate, with what the person was actually saying about the requirements, about what they're trying to do. So likewise, probably maybe you have a finance background and they are implementing anything that has to do with maybe finance projects. So you have a better advantage, sometimes when you are implementing that kind of gathering the requirement, because when the stakeholder is telling you maybe some of those let me say the accounting language or terminologies, you will be able to understand it better. But even if you don't have that, if you don't have that knowledge, because I don't have an accounting background and I'm involved in maybe the accounting project, I will ask, what does that mean? What are you trying to say? If the person is telling me one of the terminologies that I don't understand, I will ask, what is the requirement? Can you explain that? Can you explain what that means to me? So the domain knowledge is also good, because there's, for example, if you're working in maybe financial industry, some industry, they will tell you, we want somebody that has financial experience or that has regulatory experience, because they feel if they have that, is better advantage. It's easy for them to just, the person will be able to get on the project easily, so they don't have to start explaining or going through that. So sometimes some organizations do specify, or job advert, they do specify, the experience or the criteria of what they need. And when we are talking about the SME, these SMEs are just like subject matter expert. For example, if as a BA, so if I'm involved in any security project, I could be a subject matter expert in that field as well, because I know all about what the cybersecurity or what the networking is all about. So I could say that as well. I could use that to my own advantage and say, oh, I know what you're trying to do. This is it. All those terminologies, the languages, it will be easy for me to relate with the stakeholder. So likewise, anyone, it all depends on the project anyway, but it's not really mandatory, but it's just that it gives you a better advantage. So also about supplier, the supplier, you know, you have different business knowledge as well, like supplier, how do you manage your suppliers, you know, all those things is just some knowledge, is just basic things that is not mandatory, but if you have it, it just give you a better chance to be able to, you know, be successful in that project. And also when we move on to the professional techniques, so this professional techniques is the skills that you need to be able to be successful in this role. So the business modeling, this is where we talk about the process maps. We use some application to do your process map, because as a BA, there's no how you cannot escape it. You need to map your processes. Sometimes you need to do use like the use case diagram to also, you know, simulate how the system or the person, the actor relates with the system. So there are some skills, there are some things that you need to know. You know how to model a business. For example, if Tesco, they want to change the way you actually make an order, you place an order online. So they may say we want to improve the customer experience. So for you as a BA, what you need to first do, you need to first document what they do now. But how do you do it? It's not just only about writing the requirement. You need to also do this graphical to be able to visualize it as well. That's where we put it in process map. Sometimes if it's possible for you to just pick up that process map, you look at it and you understand the process of how they place an order online. So I don't need to go through the requirements, the requirement document of 60 pages, of 30 pages, before I understand the process of placing an order. So once I look at this modeling process, I'll be able to process modeling, I'll be able to understand how everything works. So that's where the business modeling comes in. Although we are still going to discuss all this in detail, but this is just like introduction for you to lay the foundation. So we are talking about the facilitation skills. This is about the skills that you need to be able to gather your requirements. We are talking about facilitating workshops, and is one of the things I mentioned on the last week, saying we are going to have maybe a mini workshop, because for you as a BA, you need to be able to facilitate a workshop, because there are several means that you can gather your requirements. It's maybe you have to gather like bring like maybe 20 people together or 6 people together. So you have to have a workshop with them. So how do you go about this? How do you carry out your workshops? What are the things, what are the questions that you need to ask? How do you manage this? How do you facilitate it? You know, these are the skills you need to be able to. You need to be able to have the skills before you can, you know, you can carry out your workshop. Although it's not really like big skills like that, but at least it's something that you need to be able, because if you are shy, if you don't like talking, there's no how you'll be able to stand in front of maybe 20 people or 15 people and be asking them questions relating with them. So it's not going to be it's not going to be easy for somebody that is timid or maybe shy to carry out that kind of thing. So that's why you need a facilitation skills as well. And we talk about the investigation skills. This is one of the skills that I use as well, the technique that I use to carry out to get your requirements. So if we have several investigation techniques that you can use, but it's just something that you need to know. You need to understand how you can gather requirements. So one of it is the workshops. Another one is is also during the interview or shadowing. And so there are several techniques that you use. So it's just something that you need to know, which we're still going to discuss maybe in the next few weeks. And also we talked about the stakeholder analysis and management. Like everything about your requirements and your project, you relate with stakeholder, because you get your requirements from your stakeholder. So how do you even analyze your requirement? Because you have levels, you know, like categories of stakeholders. So you have some people that they just have low interest or they don't even have any interest. They have something. There are some people that have high interest in what you are trying to do. You know, they are really keen. They are really interested. They want what you are trying to deliver to work for them, for you to deliver it. And there are some people that they don't even care whether you deliver. So whether you deliver the project or not, some stakeholders, they don't care. So they don't have any interest. Some people, so is high, and some people, they have interest and high impact. And some people, they have low interest but high impact. Some people, because they don't have interest in it, but they may have impact to be able to make sure that project is successful or not. So you need to be able to analyze them. So for example, if they give you any project, if they give you 5 names, you need to understand their role, find their whole stakeholders. So what is the interest of this person? So the person, if you are doing maybe finance project, and you want to roll out application for the so you want to roll out a finance application. The person in HR may not even be interested in that, but they may have high impact on that project. But the person, like the manager, maybe the finance manager, we have high interest, but may have a low impact, because if the sponsor is actually the HR manager or the HR director, so you need to be able to understand the impact and the interest of those stakeholders. So that's why you carry out your stakeholder analysis and management. So it's just, and you need to be able to know how to manage your stakeholders as well. Like I said, one of the questions that you will come across is, how do you manage a stakeholder? So because there are stakeholders that sometimes when they talk to you, they may be rude. But because you have to deal with it in a professional way, you need to be able to manage them. Because, for example, one of the instances I used to cite is that, when I was trying to work on one of the projects, and it's about data protection, and I sent so we're supposed to send the report probably maybe I think around that March 31st, and I sent a document to some of these managers to respond to me, to give me some information. And this particular person, fine, she received the information, but she just ignored the emails. And I kept chasing and say, could you please respond to my emails? Okay, sometimes she even ignores, she will not. Or sometimes she will say, I will do it tomorrow. But after a while, other people have submitted, and I just went up to probably maybe 3rd floor to say, sorry, I sent you an email, you've not responded to it, but because we have a deadline to submit this report to organization, so I will need this. And she's like, I'm very busy, I have all my day-to-day work, my day job that I'm doing, I'm sorry, I can't do it now. So, but it's just that I persuaded her to understand what I was trying to achieve, and if it don't meet up, the consequences, if it don't meet up with that, but in a very polite way and in a very friendly way. So, and I also suggested to her, saying, I don't mind, okay, if you're busy now, can I come probably tomorrow? We can even do it at your desk. You don't need to come to my office, or I can come to your location. We can do it together, and it's just going to take maybe about 1 hour or 30 minutes. And she accepted. She said, okay, as long as you can come to my desk, once I'm ready or I'm available, then I will attend to you. And I was able to achieve what I wanted from her. I went to her office, I sat with her, and she composed everything for me. She responded, and I got my results, what I wanted from her. Because she was like, everybody knows that, she's a difficult person. But it's just how you can manage them, because that kind of person, if you are not really patient enough, you may be like, she didn't respond to me, so I can, and you want to escalate it. No. But you have to make sure you try to manage them, because sometimes your manager will expect you to manage some things by yourself, without escalation. except when it is critical and you think you can't really break, you can't really get away with or maybe break that barrier, then you may need to escalate. Or your manager will want to understand what are the approach that you've taken, what are the steps that you've taken so far. So, but you say, oh, I sent an email and the person did not respond to you. That's not good enough. The manager will see you that, oh, you don't really know how to manage people, because there are some certain steps that you need to take. Maybe you go to her, you talk to her on the phone, or you walk up to the person and you talk to the person, because you need to take some certain steps before you can actually escalate. And yeah, so these are just few things on the skills as well. So there are some other things. So we move on to the roles and responsibilities of a BA. Like I said earlier, investigation is about you investigating the problem, because for every project there is something that they want to achieve. So even if, for example, it may be, sometimes it may not really be that there's a problem. It may be, for example, let's use the GDPR, because that's actually then last year or 2 years ago, it was actually a project that a lot of organizations were doing. But because they have to implement the new regulation, so you need to investigate what are the current processes or their data protection level at the moment, because the GDPR was actually on, oh, you don't need to keep, you only get the information, you only obtain the information that you need, and you need to seek consent from people before you can actually process them. You need to probably maybe only retain the information for the period that you need it. So there are some certain rules that the GDPR actually say, oh, the organization must actually oblige to. So for the investigation, if we actually use that scenario of GDPR as a BA, what you do when you get into a project, for example, they've now employed you to come and work on the project, you have to investigate. Fine, there's a requirement. So we can say that's already a requirement for you, because the European body has already given us a requirement saying we need to meet all these obligations, which is the GDPR rules. So as a BA, what you go in there, so what are the existing, how did they work at the moment? So you need to understand, what did they do? How did they process the personal data? What are the types of data they even process in the organization? Because there are some organizations, maybe they don't even process any personal data. But you need to actually investigate to be able to say, oh, we don't process personal data. Or we only process personal data but not eye-sensitive data. And even if they are processing personal or eye-sensitive data, but how do they retain that information for? How long? Do they have like the 25 years or retention period? What did they do? Those are the investigation techniques. That's the investigation process. So it now depends on the techniques that you want to use. Like we said earlier, it may be workshop, it may be interviewing. So you need to understand, you need to investigate, what is the existing thing that you're on ground before you can now say, okay, this is the solution. Or if you don't have, because there's some organizations, they don't even have retention period for the data that they have. So you can say, oh, we've actually investigated, I've asked the finance, I've consulted with the HR, with the departments. Actually, we don't have any retention period for all the data that we have. So you've carried out your investigation. Now you can say this is a problem. So the problem is now saying, oh, we need to find a solution, because the GDPR rule says we should have a retention period for all the data that we have. So now is not finding a solution to that problem. But your own activity task there is to investigate. And you've carried out the investigation, you've asked questions, and you found out that there is no retention period. Then it is now the responsibility of the information governance or whoever that is in charge of that particular project to say, oh, the BAs have identified that we don't have any retention period, so we need to make sure we apply retention period to all the data that we have in the organization. So that is the investigation process. So it's just investigating what the problem is. And if it's not even GDPR, if you look at maybe another scenario, or probably maybe the organization, they just said they want to maybe roll out a new system. So what are the systems that they actually want to, what types of things do they want to do? It's just like probing, trying to find out what their problem is, what they're trying to find the solution is, what exactly are they trying to achieve, what is the problem that they have, then they're not trying to solve. So that's where your investigation comes in. So there's no how for every project you carry out investigation to be able to understand what they are trying to achieve. So we've talked about the stakeholder identification, because even if they place you on a project, and for example, sometimes, let me say one of my last projects, they just said, oh, Abiola, so you have been, you've been assigned to this project. And I said, okay, this is the project manager's name. Contact this person. That is all. And I approached the project manager. I said, oh, I've been assigned as a BA to this project. So where do you see it? Oh, can I book a meeting with you tomorrow? And I did that. I met with the PM, and the PM said, welcome me to the project. This is where we sit. And so we sit on this floor. So this is the project team. So we usually, introduce me to the project. It was after then the project manager actually gave me some names, saying, this is the head, said, we are working with this area, try to brief me on the project, saying, we are working on this project. These are the stakeholders that will actually know at the moment. So they may give you the names of the stakeholders. Definitely they will give you at least one name, because if they don't give you a name, who do you know that you're going to relate with? So definitely for every project, they will give you at least one name, stakeholder. Then by the time you contact that person, that stakeholder, then you may now understand, say, okay, the person may tell you that actually it's not only my team, you need to contact Mr. Jones as well, Jones Paul, so it also needs to contribute to this requirement because they will be using the system as well. So from there, you are getting the names of your stakeholders, you are identifying them, and also by the time you get all those, you identify all your stakeholders, then you can now apply the analysis that I mentioned earlier to say, who are the people that has high interest, low impact, that can affect the project, that can be a blocker, things like that. That's where that comes in. So we move on to the requirement elicitation. Requirement elicitation means requirements gathering. So we use elicitation is like gathering requirement, but that is the key word that we use in business analyst word. So you say requirement elicitation, so it means requirement gathering. So it's about you gathering the requirements of what the business need, what they are trying to achieve. Like we mentioned earlier, in the case of the website, you want to develop a web page. So you need to gather your requirements for your stakeholders to say, okay, I want the website to have 4 tabs. I want it to have login page. I want it to have welcoming page, contact tab, all those requirements. So requirement elicitation means requirement gathering. And so because it's one of your roles as the BA, because it's the BA that will actually document requirement, you gather the requirements and document the requirement for the project team or the technical team or supplier to be able to implement and deliver that project. So the analysis and evaluation is about when you gather your requirements, you analyze the requirements. So what exactly are the requirements? Because there is a way that you actually, prioritize the requirements as well, which we are going to discuss later. So you need to carry out analysis as well of the requirement that they've given you, because sometimes you may have the same requirements from let's say different departments. So when you have a common requirement then you can actually document it. You don't have to duplicate it. Then you can say, okay, this particular requirement is being requested by finance, by HR, by admin, by facilities. Then you can actually document it somewhere in a requirement catalog and say, this is where, these are the people that requested, but it's a common requirement. So, you carry out all these requirements analysis, just analyzing, normal English word, analyzing the requirements and evaluate it. And the documentation of the business requirements is the key as well. Like I mentioned earlier, when you gather requirement, you speak to your stakeholders, you need to document it, because by the time you document it, they want to see it. They want to see what you've written together. Is it actually what they've told you? Is that what you have actually documented? So you need to put everything in the document. So that's why we say you document the business requirements, and because you need to send this to your stakeholders and probably maybe to the technical team if it's in-house that will be implementing this project. You need to also if it's external supplier, your external supplier needs to understand what you want them to supply, what project you want them to deliver to your organization. So that is why you need to put all these requirements together. So we're going to use another session to discuss that business requirement, documentation of business requirement in detail, probably maybe in the next few weeks. We move on to the gap analysis. For your CV, if you are actually documenting your CV, at least you need to have that gap, because as a business analyst, you carry out gap analysis. And gap analysis is like, when you have a gap, what do they have at the moment? Where are they trying to, get to? It's like your current state and your future state. So the in-between is the gap. So, for example, you have Microsoft Word. You can type, you can underline, you can bold. But at the moment, so you are using Microsoft Lesson 97. In Microsoft 2017, for example, you can do like you can strike through. You can maybe do some certain things that you cannot do on the 2007, and because business said, we want to be able to upload to SharePoint, want to able to upload the documents, just want to have the icon on the publish it, on the SharePoint, your Word, things like that, and it's something they are unable to do in 2007. So that means you've documented your requirements saying at the moment they don't have the feature of publishing on SharePoint, but in 2007, because they said they want to be able to publish documents on the SharePoint directly from Microsoft Word. The gap is publishing on SharePoint, because that's what they cannot do, because that's the gap. Is the gap at the moment, because they cannot do it. So that's why when you are documenting your business process, you document your current state, what they can do, and where you want to be. It's just like where you are at the moment and where you want to be. What is the difference? It's just like minus, difference. What is the difference in there? So when you document your requirements, they would have said, okay, this is what we are doing at the moment. Sometimes they may not even tell you. They may just say, we want this, we want this, we want this. But you are the one that will say, what exactly do you do at the moment? Do you have this feature? Is it that you just want to revamp it? Or, you need to understand what they have at the moment. Then you can say, the gap is just only 2, or the gap is just 3, or they have 5 gaps, or things like that. So then that will understand, they will be able to understand this is what they're trying to do, or the project will be able to understand what they're trying to achieve exactly. So that's where your gap comes in, gap analysis comes in. And when we move on to the requirements validation, for every requirement that you document, your stakeholder, for example, you've had workshops, you've had interview, as you've documented the requirements to your own knowledge. You need to send your requirement always. Is a must that you have to, although some people, but it's recommended that whenever you document your requirement, you need to send it to your stakeholder to validate. because your stakeholder must say, actually, that is what we want, then they can provide an approval for it. Because most times, when the stakeholder, when they give you some requirement, you know, because they will not have it in a textbook or in their own book, they may just be telling you, saying this, maybe when you meet face to face, they may just be telling you things like that without documentation, and or it may not even be in an email. Or even if it's an email, they may say, okay, we want this, and you documented it. By the time you go back to them, you documented everything, then you send it back to them that, oh, this is the requirements that you've actually requested. Can you please validate that everything remains correct and is still accurate and I've captured all the requirements? Then they can tell you. Sometimes they will say, actually, no, that is not what we need. Because maybe they realize they don't need it. Then it's an opportunity for them to actually say certify what you've documented. And most times you may actually, they may tell you something and you think that is what they've actually told you. Maybe it meant something else. Then they will be able to correct it and say, no, this is not what I mentioned. I actually meant this. So it's an opportunity for them to correct, to validate, to certify, you know, what you've documented. And this is mandatory, I mean, you know, or recommended that we should always do this before you actually request for sign off or send it to supplier or send it to technical staff before they implement. Because once you validate that, then you can say, even sometimes when they do the validation, they will feed back to you, they will provide some comments. You incorporate the comments into the documents and say, oh, I've updated this with your comments, or I've updated this. Then once you send it back to them again, they validate the requirements and say, okay, everything is now correct. Then you can request for sign off saying, can you sign off? These are the requirements that you actually requested. Once they have the sign off, then that is baseline. So even if you not send that to technical staff or the supplier and they develop maybe that project or deploy it, and the stakeholder is now coming back and say, no, that's not what we requested, then you have the, you know, you can now say, I validated this with you, this is what you said, and this is what you sign off. But if you are not carrying out the validation process, you know, that may cause problem, you know, for the BA that did you validate the requirements I told you, you did not. So the validation steps is recommended that we should always do. We move on to the terminologies. And in a BA world, we have some terminology that we use, and which I would advise. It's just like every other profession, which I think, you know, you have some keywords, and, you know, sometimes even when you're applying for jobs, the agency, the recruiter, they search for keywords. So for a BA, they may search for elicitation, they may search for gap, they may search for stakeholder, because those are the keywords that they know the language that they expect, that they know that you speak. So they will expect that to be in your CV. So for example, in maybe if you're applying for projects, don't let me use projects. If you're applying for maybe a nurse role or in a medical role, they may not search for stakeholder because they may not be using stakeholder. They may not even search for maybe elicitation or swim lane or maybe to be, because it's not relevant to their field or to their discipline. So that is why, so this is more or less like other areas as well. So you have some languages, some terminologies that you need to understand, and you use that to communicate in your BA community. And just a note, when you are using these terminologies, you use it in your BA community and with your manager. Because you must, as a BA, you must use plain language and common language, English language, to communicate with business stakeholders. You must not use this jargons that I put on the screen, you know, because some stakeholder will be like, what do you mean by elicitation? They don't understand because they'll be like, what is elicitation? So when you are speaking with your stakeholder, you communicate in plain language. But when you are documenting the business requirement, fine, you can use this because that is your business requirement, that is your deliverable. So it's fine. Or when you're communicating with because when you're communicating with your manager will not be happy if you're saying, I gather the requirements. You know, it wants you to use the word elicitation. Or when you say, oh, I've organized the workshop, the manager will just be like, oh, this one is no, this one is not, because the manager will be expecting to say, oh, when I facilitated the workshop, or I'm facilitating workshop tomorrow, and I'm carrying out some, I'm going to also, you know, speak with the stakeholders. So it will not be expecting to say to the maybe manager or something like that. Or maybe let's say the finance director, your manager will not be expecting you, you know, to say that. So if your manager and your BA community, they will expect you to speak the language that they speak, your terminologies, so that will sound professional. So, you know, that means, you know, the manager will know that, oh, this person is actually, you know, a professional BA. So, but you must note that for your stakeholders, please always communicate in plain English language with them. So for the elicitation, it means, because once we start, you know, deep dive into this course, I may be using elicitation, so you need to understand now, that's why I'm laying the foundation, that elicitation it means gathering. So if I say requirements elicitation, that means requirements gathering. So elicitation means gathering. So even in your CV, you will need to use elicitation, requirements elicitation, that you carry out requirements elicitation, you carry out these, you know, elicitation, requirement gathering. And also MOSCO, that's one of the things that we use as well in a BA. It means must, M means must, and the S means should, and the C means could. Then, and the W means won't. So it's just the priority level of your requirement, because for every requirement that you gather, you need to prioritize it. It must have a priority. It must. If you document a requirement, because your stakeholder may say, we have 100 requirements, but they may not really care if only they are really keen on 30 to be delivered. Whether you like it or not, 30 must be delivered when you are releasing it. So they may say, okay, 20 of it, if you can squeeze it in, fine. They may say 30 of those requirements, we don't really need it, but maybe later on, we don't really need it now, but it's something we may, you know, do later. So that is where your MOSCO comes in. It means must. That must is, it must be delivered. It must. There's no way about it. You have to deliver that. The should is, you could deliver. They could deliver it. You should deliver it, but it's less critical. Then the could is, they could have it, but it's something that it would be nice, but it's not something. It's also, you know, the priority is even lower again. Their won't is, they will not have it this time around, so they may decide later on whether they want to have it or not. So the MOSCO is about the prioritizing your requirements, and all your requirements must always be prioritized. So then that will actually let the developer or whoever that is going to implement the project to know that these are the requirements that needs to, you know, to be delivered. So the facilitate, like we mentioned earlier, is facilitating workshop, conducting workshop, organizing workshop. That's what it means. And the BPMN is the business process modeling notation. So this is more or less like what you use as a graphical representation of the business process, you know, like your flow chart, workflow, so that when you are communicating as a business analyst, when you are communicating with your stakeholder, they can easily understand it, and it aids your business process analysis and business improvement because they will see it in a visual, in a graphical way. So it makes them to understand it easily rather than going through all the requirements documents. So we are still going to use another session to discuss on this. So this is where your Visio comes in. Your Visio is part of it because this is part of the Visio as well. So your swim lane is part of this BPMN, your use case diagram. So just to notice that BPMN, when you say BPMN, is business process modeling notation. And the business user in your document, or when you are talking, your business user is your end, like the end users, like the people that use what you're trying to deliver. So we refer to them as business user. And your business sponsor and your project sponsor, these are the people that are accountable, for the project. They are always senior people in the organization, and they will be accountable to make sure for delivering the benefits of the business or the project, because they will be the one to say, actually, I'm sponsoring this project. So it's going to take, maybe, for example, they may say, okay, I'm going to release maybe 15 million for this project, because they will be the one to be signing it. So you need to make sure you understand what the project sponsor is all about, because you may say, oh, contact the project sponsor. Is usually senior people in the industry or in the organization. So then your stakeholder, like we mentioned earlier, these are the people that you are actually delivering the project for, your stakeholders. So you are different level of the stakeholders. We've mentioned that earlier. Then the business process model we've mentioned that as well, is still the same thing as the BPMN, is the visual graphical, like the flow charts and things like that. So we'll still come to that. We've talked about the gap analysis, so I don't need to go into that. The swim lane is one of the tools that we use to map the process. We map the process in swim lane. So some people use case. So depending on the project, we are going to do this swim lane. I'm going to demonstrate that to you how you use your swim lane. Is part of this. It's part of the MS Visio. So which is we are going to use later on. So the epic is usually a feature of what you are trying to deliver. For example, if you want to develop a website, so then you have like maybe 100 requirements. So that 100 requirements may be grouped into maybe 20 epic. So which means I may categorize and say, oh, maybe the landing page. So the landing page may be epic. So which means the landing page may have welcome, it may have contact, it may have login, it may have maybe another thing. So it's more or less like grouping of some requirements together. So that is your epic. So we can say it's more or less like a feature. So the user stories, then if you cannot say user story is a requirement. So it's usually one requirement. So we can say epic. Epic may have five user stories. Epic may have 2 user stories or maybe 3 user stories. It will have 1 or more user stories because it's a group of requirements. So, but your user stories I'm going to tell you more about the user story, but this is just the foundation. It's usually a specific requirement. I may say, as a customer, as a Tesco customer, as a customer of the Tesco, I'm just trying to use that. I want to be able to click on order, then so that I can order, maybe buy something. So that means I'm saying I want to be able to click on the button of the order tab. So that's a specific requirement. So a user story is something, it's usually formed around that as something I want to to be able to do this. The purpose, who you are, what you want to do, and why you want to do it. So we are still going to come to that later. Then your pain point is usually like the problem, like the pain, it's just like normal English, the pain, what is paining them. So what they are trying to, to solve. So that is pain point. Assist. So assist is something that you need to also know, because it's very important. You're going to use in your documentation. Assist, it means current, but we in BA we call it assist. That is assist now, assist now. So that is what we mean, assist. So means current state. Then to be means future state. So sometimes, so like if you are documenting your process map, you will not say current state. You are meant to use assist process map, to be process map. So when I'm talking, probably maybe later or in the next few weeks, and I say assist, that our assist map or our assist requirement is this, or our assist this thing is this, then you should be able to understand what I'm saying. So this assist means current, and to be means what we are trying to do or where we are trying to get to, the future thing. And the RESI is the normal, is a project management word, is the responsible, accountable, the consultant. Because when you are putting your document together, your business requirement document together, you will have to document the people that are responsible for some certain tasks. The people that are the names of people that are accountable for that as well, and the people you consulted for these requirements, maybe just to get information and be informed. The people that is just for hearing, you just inform them. They didn't actually contribute to anything. You just inform them, say that, oh, we are trying to do this, or this is what I documented, see this. So your project manager on some certain documents may just be informed. So the project manager may not be responsible for anything. And sometimes you're responsible, like I mentioned earlier, your project sponsor, you may be accountable for that project because it's the project sponsor. So it's just like the responsibility of people, and their role on that project. So that's where you have your RESI as well. So then we'll move on to SD. SDS it just means software development lifecycle, because it depends on the project that you are doing. You need to be familiar with that software development lifecycle. If you are doing like the web deployment or maybe application, so you need to understand that, because you have various stages that you need to of the project that you need to understand. And also the UML is also the unified modeling language as well. So it's part of your BPMN. And also we come to the artifacts. When I mean artifacts, I mean your documents, your materials. Like I said, the BA artifacts. The BA artifacts means the BA materials, the BA document. So your manager may say, oh, could you say, what are the artifacts that you are producing for this project? So when the manager say artifacts, then you should know that the document is referring to your documents. So your artifacts means your documents. And so we've mentioned the pain points. The prototype is like, trying to simulate because sometimes they use that in some development, like, let's say maybe like web, just to show you how it's going to look before they actually implement the exact project. So prototype. Then the SMART. The SMART is about your requirements. It means, S means specific. Your requirements must be measurable. You need to be able to measure your requirements, and if your requirements must be achievable as well, or attainable. Every requirement you document, it must be able to achieve it, and your requirements will be relevant. Because if a stakeholder say, we want to buy it may not really be relevant. So, but you need to document it, but it's something that may need to be dropped down later on, but your requirements must be relevant. And also, every requirement that you gather must be traceable. You need to be able to trace it to whoever gives you that requirement. So that's where another document comes in. We call it RTM. So you need to be able to trace your requirements, saying the finance director actually, probably maybe requested for this requirement. So you need to be able to trace your requirements to the originator. So then workshop, we've talked about that, is one of the techniques that you use to gather your requirements. And the BRD is your business requirements document. Is usually high-level requirements, high-level business requirements. So it comprises of several sections, but I'm not going to go into detail on that. So we'll move on because of time. So just to talk on the types of requirements that we have, in BA, you have high-level requirements. You categorize our requirements as high-level and low-level requirement. So when you're first documenting your business requirements, you first document it in high-level, just high-level for people to understand the overview of what the requirement is going to be. Then the low-level will be like detail to say the font size. For example, if you are developing a website, then you can say the high level may be, oh, we need to be able to type something, we need a red font. But when you are going down to the low level, when you're writing in low level requirements, you will say the font size needs to be red and size 8. You need to go down to the low level so that at least whoever that is the developer will be able to understand what they're documenting or maybe deploying for you. So we have high level and low level. So we move on to the core BA deliverables. So we can say core BA artifacts, like I said earlier. So there are core BA deliverables that they will expect for you in any organization that you work. So we call business requirement documents, and these business requirement documents usually high level, and sometimes you have to go into low level depending on how many iterations that you have. So you have a functional requirements, non-functional requirements, and your process map. So sometimes some organizations, they do this, they produce in a different document, but sometimes it may have to be combined in one document. Your functional requirements may be part of this BRD, and it will have another section of non-functional requirements, and it will have another section for the process flow. But sometimes you may have to separate it up by the time you are doing a detailed requirement, which is the low-level one. So it depends, but these are the requirements, these are the documents, your deliverable that you will do regardless of any project that you do. So you have this BRD. So it's one of the core BA deliverable. Be it construction, be it health, be it finance, you will document BRD. So business requirement document. And we have another one which we call the requirement traceability matrix. The BRD is usually in Microsoft Word, but the requirement traceability matrix is usually in Excel. When I say Excel, because if you remember the SMART, the T is traceable. So that is where this comes in. So your requirements, you must be able to trace your requirements. So it's an Excel spreadsheet that is going to have different columns, what the requirement is all about, when did you get the requirement, what the requirement is trying to achieve, when, the features, the user stories, and we are still going to do that later. So, but this is one of the documents that you need to be able to document as well, but it's usually in Excel. And like this option, these are optional. So depending on the organization that you work or the project, sometimes they do ask the BA to document the business case. Sometimes, some projects, some organization, but it's not like core BA work. But sometimes they may ask you to do it. Like the test plan and test cases is supposed to be a QA work. The QA,
that I usually document this test plan and test cases. But for example, like the projects that I'm working on right now, I actually need to document I've documented the test plan and test cases. So if you know it, it's good for you. So by the time they ask you to do it, it will not be new to you and you will not be struggling on it. So I would say if you have the opportunity to learn that, is usually good. But they may ask you to say, oh, could you please document the test cases for the solution that we'll be testing next 2 weeks. So you need to be able to know how to write the test cases. So at least I've done that in a couple of projects as well. So it's optional, it's not mandatory, but they may ask you to do it. And we have another document that we call business impact analysis. So it's also optional. So it depends, like I think about 2 places or the previous places I've worked, I didn't have to document this, but but some organization I've worked, I've actually documented it. So it's not mandatory. So it all depends, like this optional deliverables, it depends on the organization that you work as well. And some they may have in their own, depending on the organization, but those are the few ones. So the tools that you will need to know, for you to be able to carry out your BA work is, like I mentioned earlier, Microsoft Office. Visio is key, is important. So it's very easy. It's very easy to learn within 10 minutes. It's something that you can do. So it's very easy to learn. So nothing to worry about. And we are going to use Microsoft Word as well to prepare your BRD. You're going to use Microsoft Excel to document your user stories and your requirement catalog and requirement traceability matrix as well. And so depending, there are some other maybe applications that you may have to find yourself to use. So, but these 3 ones are the key ones that I know that you need to know. And I will advise, probably maybe we can download the Microsoft Office, I think you should be able to have the trial software. So you can just download it so that by the time we practice it, I do the demo, then you can be using that on your own as well. And so just to move on to I think the last slide. So if you have this certification, so there is this certificate from BCS Foundation Certificate in Business Analyst that you can do. I think it's less than £200. So it's good to have it. And there are some questions that you can practice to be able to do it as well. And also there is a textbook that will post on the Telegram. So I will recommend you to get a textbook as well. If you have it, fine. It's just a material that you can use to get yourself familiarized with, all the things that you need to know about the BA. Because for this course, I will be focusing more on the practical. But there are some theory, there are some things that you need to understand as maybe just to know it, but you may not really use it. But if you read the textbook, at least you have the knowledge, you get to know some of those things, like let's say 5 potter sometimes, you may not really apply it, but if you know it, if you need to use it, then, but I'll be focusing more on the practical side, what you will be doing, not just what is in textbook that you will not use. But it's always good to read the textbook as well. At least you may find yourself to apply, the information or the techniques, maybe anytime, on any project. So for the certification, because sometimes some organization do request, some recruiter, they will look for the certification that does this person, they may be looking for somebody that has certificates, certification on the business analysis. So that will give you more advantage as well when you are looking for a job. So to say, oh, this person has a certification in business analysis, just another advantage for a BA when you are searching for a job. And so yes, like I said, I'll post the textbook, the James, I think is the green cover. I'll post that. If you don't have it, you can get it on Amazon and just read it, and so that as we are progressing on the course, you can be reading that along as well. So if you have, at least once I'm explaining, you'll be able to understand it better. and or you can buy it later and read. And there are some materials online as well, YouTube, just to make sure, you know, because I may not be able to cover everything like the theory, because there are some things, if you are not going to use it, I'm not going to I'm not going to really, you know, go into the detail of it, but I will tell you all the things that you need to know that I'm using day to day as well, that I know is applicable in the market. So I will be discussing on that, and I think yeah, that's all for me. So any question?
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
This is a wonderful section. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Many thanks for your time. Thank you for the delivery.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
my
much.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
For your time.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question, please.
Yeah, okay.
Are you going to be releasing a video of this on YouTube, or how can
Sorry?
Thank
can
you.
we have access to a recorded version of today's lecture?
Yes, I think, yeah.
Yes.
I hope we recorded it, yeah.
Yeah, it will be posted on the YouTube channel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening.
I have a question.
The textbook. Where are you posting it at?
Please,
It will be
the
on the BA group chat, Telegram.
All right.
Hello?
Hello,
I have
yeah.
a question.
Okay.
On that terminology,
Okay.
please, can you throw more light on ROACI?
Okay, so that's the responsible, accountable, and consulted and informed. You know, when you, although we are still going to, discuss this in detail once we are documenting, you know, the business requirement, but it's just for you to be able to document who are the people, the roles and responsibility of your stakeholders, because like you have some stakeholders that are your SMEs, like subject matter experts in that field. So there are some people that are responsible. For example, like I mentioned earlier, your project sponsor is accountable for this project. So even there are some times when you have a blocker and the project manager cannot resolve it. So the person will be able to, so for example, if they don't have enough funds to sponsor the or not to sponsor, to, you know, to cater for the, you know, the resources like the BA and the solution architect to pay for the project. So the project sponsor is accountable for this. So for the successful of this project, you would say, for example, if you are documenting the table, so you put the accountable, your project sponsor, I mean the name of the person and the role of that person. So it's just a responsibility of the project team or the project board to be able to say, this person is responsible for this. There are some people that are accountable for some tasks. For example, identifying the business requirements. It will be a responsibility of the BA. So that will be against the BA. So for example, let's say the documentation of the business requirement document, it will be the BA will be responsible for it, but the project manager may be accountable for it because his project manager is actually, you know, managing that project. So the project manager is accountable for all the requirements that the BA needs to document. So you have different tasks, then you have different roles against it. So I'm going to show you that probably maybe later on. Then you see maybe identifying business requirements. You have RACI, so then that will be against the BA as a responsibility. Then probably maybe, for example, maybe the workshop, conducting the workshop, the PM may just be informed but not responsible for it. But the BA will be responsible for it. So it's just roles and responsibility of, you know, and the tasks of the project team and the stakeholders.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I've got a question. When you gave us example of when a business analyst gathers some requirements, maybe from the stakeholder regarding the website.
Yeah.
And you gave an example of the color that maybe she did not tell the developer about the colors, and in the process they've developed the website and there was no color, and the stakeholder, refused to take the project on. What I don't understand is why the BA gathered all those requirements before going into production with the developer. Are they not going to review it before final production?
Okay, yeah. So if you document the requirements, so that's the essence of you validating. So if you document the requirements, that is the essence of you validating those requirements with the stakeholders, because it's an opportunity for the stakeholders to review the requirement that you've actually documented. So if the stakeholder missed it as well and did not, take note of the mistake or the error or the omission of that red font, so the stakeholder will not be blamed for it, but the BA will be blamed for it, because the BA should have a manager. Because when you document your business requirements, you have like a team lead or your BA manager who is responsible for the QA, quality assurance, of that document. So that's why some organizations, they will feel they don't want to hold you by hand and be helping you to do the work. They expect you that when a stakeholder give you a requirement, you should be attentive, you should be detailed about it, you should be able to document the right thing, because even if you send the document to your BA manager to review for the QA purpose, for the quality assurance, your manager will not be aware of the red fonts, because your manager will just look at the documentation, whether what you've used, the grammar and some other things, if it's okay, just for the QA aspect, but does not really know much about the requirements. So it's the responsibility of the BA. So that's why the BA actually needs to capture the requirement. So the BA manager will review, but not in depth, because the person will not know about the red fonts, will not be there when the stakeholder was actually giving you the requirement. So it's really difficult. So that's why everything lies on the BA to actually do. Then send it to the stakeholder to review that documentation. So because it's possible that the stakeholder will spot that and say, actually, there's no red font in here, we actually mentioned red font, then you can use the opportunity, to put it there to say, oh, yes, let's put the red font in there. So I've missed that, sorry. But if the stakeholder misses as well, I'm sorry. Yeah, because the developer will not know the requirement, because they will not be speaking with the stakeholder. So they will be liaising with the BA, then the BA will be liaising with the stakeholder. So the BA is the middleman, and if the middleman does not really capture the right requirements, I'm sorry, because it's whatever you give the developer, they will do. Although sometimes if they have an awareness and they feel something is not right, they may ask you a question and say, are you sure you don't? Because an experienced developer may say, what color? If they read the specification, and they may say, actually, we've read your requirements, you did not mention the font color for the login page. So could you provide that? So that means they've actually helped you to identify the gap in your requirement. Then you can go to the stakeholder and say, what color do you want for the font? Then you can include that, update that in your requirement. But if you have a developer that is not really care about your requirements or is not really experienced enough, that developer may miss that as well. But an experienced and detailed developer will ask you that question, what color do you want for that font?
Yeah.
So any other question before we call it a day? Night.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for your time, and the session was indeed a thorough session. A quick question. You mentioned you mentioned just one certification that as a BA we can take advantage of. What other, for example, in accounting, you have chartered accountant and all that. What other certification can we look to write or participate in?
Well, for me, for BA, it's just only BA that I will recommend, because this is actually for the business analyst, and I know the BAs, they have some, from some diploma, foundation practitioner in business analyst that you can do. So at least the minimum. So at least the minimum that I would suggest is just the foundation certificates in BA. So I'm afraid I don't know any other one aside, the BCS certificates in BA. But I know there is practitioner and there's also some diploma courses as well. But if you check on the BCS site, definitely you should be able to see some business analysis certification.
All right.
Is there any assignments that we're gonna take home from this?
At the moment, no assignments. Sorry, at the moment, no assignments.
Okay,
it's just to lay the foundation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other question before we call it today?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
I think you should just.
Yeah. I just want to ask a question.
Okay.
Is it possible to know what we're going to be doing next week, Tuesday, please?
At the moment, I think.
Oh, what I mean is the next class. Is it possible to know what we'll be doing?
Yeah, we are going to be looking into. We're going to be looking into the investigation techniques.
Okay.
And if we can cover the requirements, yes, we'll start the requirements, but we'll look into the investigation techniques.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think, so we can call it today. So we'll meet next week by God's grace.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Really good listening to you.